Alrighty, let's get this. This is a follow up to the Awakening of Biomancer Part 1. This is Part 2. I've outlined a 6 parts, 5 in addition to this one, for a total of 7 in the introduction to this, which is the Awakening of Biomancer. So, what I've done is I've come up with sort of like notes, for myself. Just real quick, what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to follow through with that. And like I said last time, I'm going to start with the Book of Water and the Spirit by Malidoma Patrice Sommeil. So last time we talked about the Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. Talked about how the shamans spoke with the spirits of plants in order to, gain knowledge about the plants and what they could be used for, as well as how the pharmaceutical corporations coveted that knowledge and sought to use it for their own profits and gains in that way. And so we saw that colonialism never ended, and that there's this whole spirit realm thing that we have the shamans getting their medicine from. So before we go into the science of how this is possible, which will be next video, this video is going to be about just expanding our view of what kind of things happen within this world of shamanism. So going to that Book of Water and the Spirit by Malidoma Patrice Sommeil, speaking with the spirits of plants, with that book, The Lost Language of the Plants, we saw that there's plants adjusting their chemical physiology as they're responding to things happening in their environments. And hearing of water and the spirit, we actually see something possibly beyond that. Malidoma's grandfather was the medicine man of the tribe, and he kept an eye on the field that they had growing food. He kept an eye on those plants down the road by keeping with him seeds from the plants that were growing. In that way, he would be able to know what was happening in the field down the road. And so there's a lot of other miraculous things, I guess, that Malidoma's grandfather did as the medicine man, speaking with the spirits, the unborn, before they're born. When Malidoma was in his mother's womb, he actually the way that it goes is that the medicine man will speak with the spirit of the unborn before they are born, in order to help them remember, upon their birth, or when they're now in the realm of the living, so they will remember who it was that they are and why it is that they came here. So when his grandfather spoke with the spirit, that's where he got his name, Malidoma, which means befriends the enemy. Now, Malidoma, when he was about, I want to say about 7 or 8, he was kidnapped by these French Jesuits and taken to a sort of mission or boarding school. We see that this happened all over the world. Native Americans in the United States and Canada, and I'm sure a lot of other places that indigenous people all over the world. Jesuits went everywhere, and they actually issued a apology to the lost generation in Australia. So, and I'll go ahead and I'll put together in the description, if not immediately, I'll be putting together some show notes, and I did that for the last video, but I'll start doing that so that the things that I talk about, you can go and click and see more information or more books, videos, resources, stuff like that. So so Malidoma's name meant befriends the enemy, and that was a prophecy that he was going to get kidnapped and go to study with the Jesuits. And so, but before he left, his grandfather did something that was pretty spectacular. He walked down the road into a village nearby and laid down on the bed in a clinic and was pronounced dead. He then proceeded to get back up, walk all the way back to the village, and have a Last Supper ceremony where the tribe, mourned and wept and, had this outpouring of energy that he then, harvested magically to propel himself out into the stars. So, believe it or not, this is just a pretty standard type of thing that, we come from the stars and we're going to the stars. The Nazis, they believe they're communicating with, off-species people from Andromeda, but they were following, Tibetan types of, mystic things like, Blavatsky, and the Theosophical Society that was big on, making that contact with, the Tibetans and the Buddhists initially, and starting to bring some of that wisdom, some of that influence into the West. So, and this has implications for things like technology, right? We'll get into all that stuff another time. I'm gonna try to stick to this paper that I got here so we can get through everything and try to keep this around like it was last time, about 40 minutes. So, we have of water in the spirit. His grandfather's laying down, being pronounced dead, walking back, having his final supper. And so when I heard this story, I said, well, how is it that he can lay down and be pronounced dead and then get back up? Was he not really dead? And why would it be that they would consider him to be dead? Where would this confusion come from? And so, I was delighted to learn from a friend who has been studying Buddhism as he got into his studies, and eventually he started listening to a guy named Sadhguru. And so, after a while of him listening to Sadhguru, he comes to me with the story and tells me that Sadhguru got hooked up to, some kind of instrumentation to, monitor his physiology and see, what was going on with his brainwaves and stuff like that when he was in meditation. And so, Sadhguru, he goes into meditation, and they start poking and prodding and hitting him, trying to get his attention, trying to see if they can affect, these readings, because they're looking at him, they're finding some sort of issue. And so eventually Sadhguru's like, what are you guys doing? He said, oh my goodness, we thought you were dead. His brainwaves had become so still or whatever. They thought he was dead. So I thought that that was very interesting and lent a little bit more credence to this idea that Maui Loma's father or grandfather could have done something like this. Um, and so, that's what this video is kind of about, is just, introducing more of these sort of, fantastical stories. And then, the next video will go into science um, that we have to begin bridging that gap. And so, another one of these things, I mentioned the Theosophical Society recently in Blavatsky. You had this lady named Alexandra David Neel. It's that book of magic and mystery in Tibet that I mentioned. This one right here. And Alexandra David Neel, she was a French lady. And she went into Tibet in a time where foreigners weren't really allowed so much. They weren't so welcome. And she was a woman at that. And yet she became a lama, high level in this sort of Buddhist hierarchy. And one of the amazing stories that I thought in this book, they talk about the way that a yogi dies or passes on. And when the yogi dies, the yogi is going to project out the top of the head. The spirit's going to leave that way. When a normal person dies, they might leak out the eyes or ears or mouth or other places. And, that's just where this story comes in, with Alexandra David Neel walking through Tibet and coming across a pair of two monks sitting, in this open space facing one another, and one is shouting "Hik" and the other is shouting "Fa." And now, when they shout these words, it's a lot more than, just like what I was doing right now, but it's really, what they're doing is the "Hik" to open up, and the "Fa" to project out. And so the reason why you have two of them is because if it were one of them going through this whole Hik-Fa process and really truly projecting out, they'd kill themselves. That'd be a suicide. Just projecting out, leaving. But by practicing this actually allows them to practice, because they're actually going to guide other people who are dying. They'll guide their souls out through the top of their heads by getting in tune with this sort of practice. And so, we'll see how, you really can, guide energy as we study more the medical qigong. And so I'm not saying that I'm going to teach you that particular thing, because it's not something that I've practiced, but, it is within that realm. And then another interesting story from that book was about, and I actually saw John Barnwell with American Intelligence Media the other day. I forget who he was speaking with, but they actually brought up this story where you had Alexandra David Neel. She sees a man in trance running with big leaps and bounds down the mountain, up the mountain, away. And it was a very deep trance state that was used for quick transportation. And, these sort of meditative states, it was known you don't want to mess with those people because the absorption that, is taking place in that state, you don't want to break it as the, result of an abrupt, departure from that state could be damaging. And that's something that we'll also see, later on as we start to learn more about energetic development. And so, this is of water and the spirit and magic and mystery in Tibet. Two different shamanic type of cultures from Africa and from Tibet to complement what we had learned about with the Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and the ayahuasca from South America. So we're going to go back to South America real quick because there were a couple other books that I read. Actually, I think I just got one of those recently. Here it is. Ayahuasca Medicine by Alan Shoemaker, The Shamanic World of Amazonian Sacred Plant Healing. And you can see there, he's got his palm open. That point, we call it Lao Gong in the Chinese system. But this is one of those books that I read. I read this one here, Ayahuasca Medicine by Alan Shoemaker. I read another one by Peter Gorman called Ayahuasca in My Blood. And, a lot of very, very interesting stories in them. And some more of that sacred art. Some of that visionary art from... this is actually from a student. The last book I showed, I said that we had Pablo Amaringo. This here that I was showing, that was Anderson de Bernardi. And Anderson de Bernardi is a student of the prior mentioned Pablo Amaringo, and Pablo Amaringo actually has a school where he teaches, this sort of style of painting. And so I forget which of the two books it was. It was either the Ayahuasca Medicine or the Ayahuasca in My Blood, and I'm starting to think it was the Ayahuasca in My Blood. But there was mention of a U.S. military ayahuasquero. And so, before we had talked about the ayahuasqueros having dealings in the spirit world in order to achieve healings for individuals. Well, these things could also be used to hurt people. And so this is something that, I saw in Malidon and Patrice Somme's Of Water and the Spirit. In that world, it was greatly, accepted, widely understood that you could, in fact, it happened that people would die as a result of, magical spells or energetic arrows that would be thrown. And, this is even something that, the U.S. military with that, there was a movie made about it called The Men Who Stare at Goats. Right? And they're stopping the heart of a goat with their stare. And these are this energetic strangulation kind of thing, like a Darth Vader or something. But so before we'll come back to one of those types of stories, But looking at my notes here, I'm seeing there's the guy on the river. There's this story from, and this might have even been from the Cosmic Serpent. And I think this was ayahuasca in my blood. He goes down there and he meets a guy in Peru who, kind of takes him through the jungle. He becomes like his tour guide. And, they're out in the forest. He's not eating much. The guy goes out and kills a monkey and brings it back and is cooking it up, says, hey, eat. He says, I'm not going to eat a monkey. And so they get to another town. I think eventually he does eat some monkey. But they get into a village, and the sort of guide tells the tourist, I guess, tells him, hey, I need you to drink the ayahuasca and see where my son's at. He says, what the hell are you talking about? I don't want to drink ayahuasca. What's this about seeing where your son's at? He says, yeah, take the ayahuasca, see where my son's at. He says, you go take the ayahuasca, see where your son's at. He says, no, I can't do that because I have to stand guard. I have to stand watch. You take the ayahuasca, see where my son's at, let me know. And so, reluctantly, he takes the ayahuasca, and he totally forgets to, inquire about where this guy's son's at. Really he's thinking, how the heck am I going to see his son? I'm not some kind of psychic person, or I can't, do this. And so he ends up going out, from Peru. He ends up out in New York City or something like that, where he's from, observing, his roommate and some friends in a sort of unusual situation that, he later confirmed was actual in regards to, it being not your typical thing that he would have expected to see, right? And then he comes out of trance, and the guy's like, hey, did you see my son? Where's he at? And he says, oh, I couldn't find him. I couldn't do it. He'd totally forgotten. So he goes back to his own space, and he lays down, and he inquires about the man's son. Next thing he knows, he's on a snake, swimming up the river. And he gets to this mountain. He's going up the mountain, the river. And eventually he comes to this boat, and he sees there's two people in the boat. And something brings him out of that vision. But he tells the guy what he saw, and the guy says, oh, yeah, I don't know why you saw two people. It's just my son. There's only one. But, if that's what you were seeing, they'll be here by about noon, so get ready. Or he'll be here by about noon, so get ready. And so, he's like, what the heck? Whatever. Gets ready. And, when noon comes around, the guy's son shows up. He's the only one who's surprised, despite the fact that he's the one who saw him. It's just not part of what's supposed to be possible. At least not where I grew up. Anyway, so this is all, very, very interesting stuff. And again, I said there's the military ayahuasca. I think I get a book right here. The Mind Race, Russell Targ, Understanding and Using Psychic Abilities. Now, this actually, Russell Targ, he worked with SRI, Stanford Research Institute. On the back of it, you actually have praise from Willis Harmon, the senior social scientist at SRI International. And he says of this book, he says, Russell Targ and Keith Harari have written the first comprehensive and popular book on this subject. They make available techniques to a wide public, which will do more than a whole host of scientific papers to remove the cloak of mystery that has often surrounded psychic abilities. So they're making techniques available. It says with this, this can help you to face decisions that must be made without adequate information, promote stronger emotional bonds with close and distant friends, forecast the future, locate lost objects, missing persons, archaeological sites, hidden natural resources, interpret dreams and make use of their context, enhance your success in everything from making the right business decisions to finding a parking space. So, no, that's the back of this book. But I think that, what I really wanted to get at is that this has, military implications. And that's what it says here on the inside a little bit more. It says, you know who was calling before you answered the telephone, even the call was unexpected. Have you ever walked into a new place and felt certain that you've been there before? How many times have you had experiences that you dreamed about months or years ago? Enter the Mind, a book that explores the many facets of physics functioning, or of many facets of psychic functioning. Utterly fascinating book that reveals for the first time insights and techniques that have emerged from decades of scientific research in the US and Soviet Union. A totally convincing book that demonstrates, based on hundreds of experiments with ordinary people, the accessibility of genuine psychic abilities to anyone who decides to learn about and use them. So what are psychic experiences? And so what they're looking at, remote viewing, the ability to see from far away, objects as large as an airport and details as minute as a microdot, telepathy, the ability to experience thoughts, feelings, and perceptions of a distant person, and precognition, a knowledge of future events that cannot be perceived by any known means. So pioneer researchers Russell Targan and Keith Harari debunk media stereotypes of psychic functioning. They show there's nothing abnormal or unusual about psychic abilities at all. Rather, it's a subtle information processing capability. And so I'll leave that at that. This mind race, point of that being, big institutions are putting money into, making this research happen. Here is another book we'll talk about next one: Scientific Exploration of Qigong, or Scientific Qigong Exploration, and just the I guess pedigree of the training that some of these scientists have gone through, who have something to say about the subject other than a dismissal as complete BS. These are people who are actually willing to consider the data. And so I think that we're getting there. There's a few more things that I wanted to touch on. We have I guess as part of this series, the last video was, the Cosmic Serpent and the lost language of the plants. We talked a bit about those things. This one has been, more telling some of these interesting stories. And, coming up next is going to be, giving, the scientific background to, these things with, books like the Psychoenergetic Science, Scientific Qigong Exploration, Becoming Supernatural, and I mean, there's a lot there. I got a whole, here's my notes on that, right? I've been talking for this long based off of this right here, half of the page. So, that might, we'll see how long that one goes. But, so after, get some stories out, right? Now now that you've seen this, you might be saying, okay, I'm ready to, see some sort of science, some sort of, proof that these ideas and stories are worth, considering, as potentially true rather than as, blatantly um, just false, from the get go. And so, after we get the sort of scientific background to the reality of, um, I guess there are multi-dimensional existence, we'll look at the perennial philosophy, wisdom category, and the mystery schools, the mysteries as the foundation of civilization and civilization science. And so, with that big picture of things, we will, go through a, sort of instruction on energetics. So we'll do some qigong and some teaching about that energy skill, and then with that we will wrap it up with the biomancer perspective and really introducing that, because by the time we're done with these first 6 videos, I think we'll be ready to talk about the biomancer perspective, and you'll have some sort of background to be able to um, really appreciate it for what it may be. So look forward to that. I guess I could say that in terms of some of these stories, I haven't really actually myself had a whole lot of things with, say, like astral projection, lucid dreaming. I just wanted to bring up Robert Monroe and Robert Bruce. Robert Monroe taught astral projection to the CIA, some other people. He had an institute. They worked with the binaural beats, I believe, to help facilitate the astral projection. But one of the things that was really interesting from his stories, because, like I said, I haven't really had a whole lot of lucid dreaming. It's not something that happens for me a lot. But when I was younger, I used to have certain recurring dreams. And before that, when I was in elementary school, maybe like 7 or 8, I would sit back and stare into the corner, and my vision would start jumping around, and I would try to go into that and see what was happening. But the moment it started happening and my mind said, oh, what's this, it stopped. But what Robert Monroe described, it sounded so much like what I experienced, where his energy's jumping around, and then poof, he deepens that connection into that energy, and he's out of body. So that was kind of brought the story of the out of body stuff a little bit closer to home, since it's not something that I have really experienced a lot. So but in terms of like the energetics and the medical qigong, we can move chi, just like we can do a lymphatic flush with massage. You can move chi with your chi, and that's definitely something that we will talk about, um, and we'll get to that when we get to that. yeah, I think that's about a wrap. I think that's a good show. Um, so, like I said, the next one we'll go into we'll go into some scientific things. Um, hope you enjoyed. Hope you are intrigued. Hope you are hungry to learn more, and we will expand our minds and you know become equipped for this great work which lays before us. And that reminds me of a quote that I heard in church a couple years ago. I was in church and they said that God does not call the equipped, he equips the called. And so the meaning there being that if you have the desire, you are worthy and you are powerful and you can become an instrument for the unfolding of great things here on this planet. And it's not that you have to be equipped and ready to do all the things, because all the people who are equipped and ready doesn't mean that they're going to do what needs to be done. But when you are ready and when you are willing to do what needs to be done, you will become equipped in due time. Something I'd always tell myself. All things in due time. And recently, I heard a quote that said, there's a book called The Speed of Trust. I think it's by Stephen Covey. I don't want to say it's by his son. Um, but he talks about things happening at the speed of trust, and I thought there was a really interesting sort of twist on that I heard recently last year. Said things don't happen at the speed of trust; they happen at the speed of alignment. And so, in order for us to align properly as a force for positivity here on this planet, we need to have, a good solid vision that we can align on. And I think there's really a lot to be said on that. And maybe, um, well, that's really why I've developed this whole thing, Biomancer, and why I'm doing these videos. So we will get into that soon. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sticking it out, and I hope that you will come again and we can make some magic. Let's get it. Thank you. Peace.